Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar, 100% Homework Hand-In, a Myth or Reality. This will be led by Juliet O'Callaghan, who is Lead Professional Head of Psychology at Wootton Upper School. Her interest in pedagogy, and in particular how to motivate students to want to learn, has always driven her teaching practice. Homework has become a very important part of her students' learning, which she will demonstrate throughout this webinar. I will now pass over to Juliet. Thank you.
Okay, so the VLE is not a magic bullet, I would say. A teacher needs to be consistent in their approach to homework if they wish their students to be. So the VLE can help, but obviously you've got to have consistent measures in place yourself as a teacher. However, I do know setting homework, collecting it and marking it with detailed comments is very difficult to achieve, particularly when you may have lots of classes and only see them once a week. We find that particularly in Year 9 in our school. Added to that, teachers are now supposed to be able to demonstrate students have acted on feedback and have made progress over time as a result. I know in my school this has led to the situation where teachers are being encouraged, I've put in brackets coerced, into showing this is happening through using acronyms such as WWW, EBI and MRI. If you haven't come across them, you're lucky, but it means what went well, even better if, and my response is. However, what I found is students writing normally in a different coloured pen under the term MRI, I will use more full stops in my next piece of work, is not actually demonstrating that they've used the feedback or taken it on board. All it is actually doing is ticking a box on a work sample exercise. So, what I want to show you is that through the quizzes and through the VLE assignments, you can basically set homework that first of all marks itself. That frees you up to focus on what the results are telling you and actually act on those, so alter your teaching plans accordingly. And where you actually want to provide detailed formative comments, the VLE assignment function makes it much easier for you to provide feedback and to monitor your students' responses to this, while also providing a record of progress over time, which has become equally very important. And you can do all this without ever having to use one acronym. Before I continue with some specific examples, I'll give you a brief background of my use of the VLE in our school and my rationale behind it. I'm actually the lead professional in the school for the VLE. One of my roles is to actually train staff. Okay, one of the problems we identified in our sixth form, which is why I've got my psychology year 12 page up, is that our sixth formers are very passive as learners. In particular, they lack independent study skills. Our Key Stage 4 results demonstrated a dip from Key Stage 4 to Key Stage 5. Our students were not achieving what we would have expected them to achieve based on their GCSE performance. Therefore, I set about designing about 4 years ago an online curriculum for A-level psychology. The idea being it would empower and enable our students to take control of their learning. Just interested in my department alone, our ALPS data jumped from a 7 about 4 years ago up to a significant 3. So certainly the use of the VLE has had a very positive effect. It tends to fluctuate around 3 or 4 in terms of ALPS data. When I first did my approach, it was seen as a little bit quirky to start with, and I'm certainly not advocating one approach to teaching over another. But I also think that the standing at the front of the class, the chalk and talk or the death by PowerPoint is not working for a majority of our students. We're putting much more effort in than our students are, and we're not seeing the results of those. Obviously, as a psychology graduate myself, I'm very interested in teaching methods and how we actually get students to be independent. And the VLE is a great piece of technology that actually allows that independence to happen. We have a generation of students who are used to getting their information online, not from libraries, and therefore I was very much aware that we needed to provide some online way for them to access information. And for me, the answer lay in the VLE. So if you look on the page that I've got showing, it's the Year 12 psychology page. As you can see, the whole of the Year 12 course is set up, and so the students can access it from anywhere. They don't actually have to be in lessons. On the left-hand side, you have all the units that they possibly are going to need to carry out. So in the first term, they look at the biological approach, the behaviourist approach and the cognitive approach. The planner also clearly states what they should be doing in lessons. So at the moment, they're all working on conducting a piece of research, which they then have all the resources attached at the bottom there. And finally, they have the assignment that they've got to produce also attached. This means they can work relatively independently in groups rather than me having to direct all of their learning. It also means if they miss a lesson, of course, they can click into the relevant folder or the planner and find out the work they've missed and catch up. So if I just show you how this works for a particular unit of work. So I'm in the cognitive approach now. This is one of the approaches they have to look at in the first term. Each approach has a web page attached to it. And this web page is basically the learning for that topic. So you can see that they've got videos that they can watch, they've got questions that they can answer, more videos, different styles of learning that they can use to access the information. Once they've carried out all the tasks on the page, they then have to complete the assignments. So there they have a list of all their assignments, so PY1 assignments. They click on those, and what you'll find is the assignments are linked to the web pages. So if we look for the cognitive assignment, after they've done the work on that page, they should now be able to carry out question 2, describe CBT or RET. And then, as you can see there, you've got the marking scheme already printed out, the examiner's report relating to what sorts of answers they should be giving, and then very clearly the students who have submitted the work and the students who haven't submitted the work at the bottom. So basically all their learning can take place online. Also, I found that using the VLE is great for differentiation, because what you can actually do is you can set the work for them to do at home, so a flipped learning approach. So you can set them work to watch the videos, answer the questions. I'm just trying to go to another web page, hang on. I do know what I'm doing really. So in the biological approach, they have to describe general adaptation theory, and then they have to answer questions on it. So in terms of differentiation, what you can do is set them the work to do at home. So there's a video here that they can all watch at home with associated questions. They then come into class with the answers to those questions, and then I can check in class who's struggling with that activity, who's found it easy, and that means that I can actually set personalised learning during the lesson. So some students who have grasped that video quite easily can go up and do some more work on it to extend it. Other students who have struggled with that work I can then spend time with. In terms of how we set up the classes, all our classes are arranged in learning groups of 4 to 5 students. So what I do is I base these learning groups on ability. So within my class I might have 20 students and 4 learning groups of 5 students. So I might have all my A grade students grouped together, which means that they can work on the activities at a different pace to other people in the class. I do spread our weak students out across all groups, because I find a group of weak students working together don't work particularly well because they don't really have any role models on how to work effectively. So our weaker students are spread out across all the learning groups. All the lessons we complete are student-led, in that there will be learning outcomes to achieve, but the group works at their own pace during the lesson to complete the activities, and obviously they can use a variety of resources on the VLE to help them. This frees me up as a teacher to spend lesson time actually going around each group and checking that they're getting on with the work and that they're coping with the work. It also means, because each learning group is based on ability, that I can set questions or differentiate questions based on the ability of that group. So I can stretch my most able students, but I can also support my weaker students. So the groups work at their own pace. They look at videos, they work on questions. Obviously my high ability groups can be directed to even higher resources. So for example, on our front page we have a link to the BPS, which I'm just showing you now, Society's Research Digest. This is obviously graduate-based research that's conducted, which I can then push my high ability students towards reading, and they can link recent articles to the work they're actually doing. This is obviously year 12 and 13 that I'm talking about, but I really wanted to focus today on our year 10s, because I think teachers often feel that it's okay to get year 12s and 13s working independently and doing homework, but what about our lower years? So I'm going to take you to the year 10 sociology page now, which is where I really want to show you all about homework. So this is the year 10 sociology page. This is a shared page. There's a number of teachers who teach sociology. There's Miss Massey, Miss Knight, Mr. Rutter and myself, which you can see down there. So we've all got our own folders and our own lessons to start with. And what we've done is set permissions up so only our students can see our particular lessons and folders. And you can do that quite easily by setting permissions. Okay, so if I want to set permissions up, so my folder is only for my class. So I click on permissions. I select who can see and participate in this folder. And as you can see, it's just my class on the right-hand side that has permission to see my class. What this means is that though the page may look a bit confusing to you looking at it, it means that the students only see the work that is relevant to them. So my students only see my Mrs. O'Callaghan's lessons and my homework quizzes and my discussions. They don't see the other information, Miss Matters or Mr. Rutters. So it's really easy to share a page, and therefore the teachers can share their resources, but actually ensure that your students only see the information that you want them to see. So I teach in exactly the same way in year 10 as I do in year 12. I have learning groups set up in class. So again, I split the class up into groups of 4 to 5, based mainly on ability, but also on personality. And within that, I make sure that the weak students are spread out through the groups. Obviously, my year 10s don't work as independently as my year 12s and 13s, but the idea is to model this approach so when they reach sixth form, they are able to work much more independently. It's like it prepares them and gets them in good habits. So homework then. 100% homework hand-in. Is this a reality or is this a myth? Well, I'd actually like to demonstrate to you that it is a reality. And this class of year 10 students who are mixed ability, so you've got students with target grades ranging from E up to A, are all handing in their homework every single week. So if we go to my homework quizzes first of all, this is what I use on a weekly basis to actually assess their learning. So in homework quizzes you can see there are quizzes numbered, quizzes 1 down to 18. And what happens is basically each week the students know that on a Wednesday they'll be set a quiz, and they know that they have to complete that quiz before the lesson on the following Monday. So they have from the Wednesday until the Monday to complete that quiz. So if you click on quiz 1, you'd expect all your students to complete the very first piece of homework you set them. So it's not really a surprise that we have 100% hand-in for this one, but I'm just demonstrating to you that we have. So every single student has submitted. The 3 students down the bottom here in red submitted slightly late. So I set the cut-off time for the Sunday night, and they didn't submit straight away. And in fact, one student was off. In fact, this student here, Millie, at the bottom, started the course late, so that's why her submission is so late. But the red ones tell you the students that are handing in late. But as you can see, 100% handing on the very first piece of homework, which is what you'd expect. So let's have a look a bit further on. So what happened when the following week came along? So quiz 2 was the second week of learning. And again, I'm not filtering. I'm just saying all attempts there, because you can filter by submitted and not submitted. So all attempts are in here. And you can see once again, 100% hand. And if you can see this time, the students actually handed in on time. There were no late hand-ins this time. And that's because the late hand did result in a detention. So the students learnt very quickly not to hand in late. Let's go a bit further on in the year. So obviously, students are often very good at the beginning of the year. So let's go to quiz 7. So this is in the autumn term, much later on. So we're looking in October now. And again, we have all attempts and we have 100% hand-in, and again, no late. If we look at quiz 8, the same thing again. So every single student has handed in. This time there were 4 students who handed in late, as you can see here. And these students did receive a detention, which is why they've got a late hand-in. So the way it works is, so I hope I've demonstrated to you that you can actually get 100% hand-in on your homework if you stick to a simple routine. So our routine is set the quiz every Wednesday. It has to be completed before Monday's lesson, and the quiz is based on the previous 2 lessons' work. I'll show you some quizzes in a moment. I can then check that the quiz has been done before the lesson even starts. So Monday morning when I get in before the lesson starts, I actually go onto the VLE and actually check that every single student has handed in. What this means is the start of the lesson is much, much more efficient because I'm not collecting in homework at the beginning of the lesson. I can get the students straight onto the starter activity, which is brilliant. It also means that I can have already set detentions and already given out commendations before the lesson begins. So again, I'm not spending time doing that or arguing with children about detentions. So they know if they arrive at the lesson and the quiz isn't completed, they know before they even get there that they will be back that lunchtime in a detention to complete the quiz. If they already have a detention that lunchtime from another subject, they know it will be the following lunchtime. And they know that, so they actually come into the lesson prepared for that. Often I'll have students walk in and say, I know, I should have done it, but I didn't. I'll see you at lunch, ma'am. So it certainly works at making them get into a routine. Students who receive more than 8 out of 10 for the quiz, and I always do them out of 10, and the pass mark is always 8, they know they will have received a commendation before they get to the lesson. In our school, we send commendations home by text message. So they love that because they know that on a Monday when they get home from school, their parents are going to congratulate them on the commendation. Also, the students know what score they got before they arrive because I've set the quizzes up so that it shows them how well they've actually done in the quiz, and they can actually see for themselves how well they've done. In terms of differentiation, it's possible that you can set a quiz up, and I'll show you in a minute how to set a quiz up, where they can have more than one attempt. So if you've got a particularly weak group or a weak set of students, you can allow those students to have more than one attempt at the same quiz so that they can actually practice the quiz over time. I've personally set my quizzes up as one attempt only because I want to see whether they did gather the information they needed in lessons and whether I need to go over anything. I don't know whether we want to take a break in a moment. I'm not quite sure when we're going to take a break because I want to show you how to set up a quiz.
We've just got a couple of questions.
Okay.
So the first one is, this is from Jennifer, and she's interested in exploring potential differences in homework hand-in for different subjects at different key stages. Has your work significantly influenced homework practice in other subjects within your school? And have any subjects found it more difficult to adopt than others?
I would say it's significantly altered a lot of the way departments manage homework. I have yet to come across a subject that cannot use homework quizzes in some capacity, except maths. Maths find that the homework quizzes, because they're not set up for maths questions, they find that they're not particularly ideal for them. History's taken it up, our guidance programme has taken it up, sociology has taken it up, English uses it to test their understanding of text. So yes, it has made a significant difference, particularly in our Year 9 students, where we have lots of classes and probably only see them once a week.
Brilliant. We've also got another question here. What do you do with students who don't have internet access at home?
Yeah, that was one of the things I worried about to begin with, because obviously pupil premium students, for example, our poorer students may not have access at home. One of the reasons I give them until the Wednesday to the Monday is, first off, it's very rare a student doesn't have any internet access at all, and certainly in all the classes I've taught, even the students, even the poorest of students that we teach, tend to have internet access. It's one of those things that is almost an essential now. So most students can access the internet at home or at a grandparent's house or an aunt and uncle's house, but I give them 5 days to complete, and I put a weekend in there as well, so they have got plenty of time to go and find a computer. Second thing is, most schools, and our school does it, it runs an after-school homework club and before school homework club every day in the library with internet access. So I don't allow that to be a reason or an excuse for non-homework hand-in, and to be fair, I've never had a student use it.
Brilliant. And then the final one, for the time being, we've got, how do you get the staff to use it? How do you find it? How do you find it?
In terms of getting the staff to use it, certainly from my perspective, getting the staff to use the VLE is the starting point, not so much the quizzes. So what you've got to do as a school, and what we did as a school was, we've made sure that VLE use and using the VLE was a high priority on our school development plan for 3 years in a row. It's still a high priority now, and that meant actually building in CPD time for whole staff. So throughout the year we had VLE training sessions, and we've been doing that for the last 3 years now. Also, as I am the VLE champion at the school, I actually use my games time in the summer to teach staff one-to-one how to use the VLE, because some staff are quite nervous of it. I would say there is no magic way of doing it. It's lots and lots of different approaches. It's using it, talking about it, showing it, training with it, one-to-ones. We've got all our staff doing bronze training as well. And it's a continual drip feed approach that works.
Brilliant. Yes, that's it for questions for the time being. Should we carry on?
Yeah, so I was just going to go through how to set a quiz up very quickly and then show you a bit more detail about how to use the quizzes.
Okay, fab.
So that's how the quizzes work, and I hope I've demonstrated that you do get 100% hand-in. As I say, you have to be consistent. It's up to you to be consistent, but it's just really makes your life so much easier. So in terms of setting up a quiz, they're very, very simple, and then you can use them year on year, which is brilliant. So I've set up a homework quiz folder. You don't have to. Your quizzes can be anywhere you want, but I've called them homework quizzes so that the students can find them. They know where to look for them. You just use your add button. I think itslearning calls them tests. Yes, they call them tests, but I think students respond better to the word quiz than test. So we add a test. You give the test a title. So I'm just going to put VLE practice test. So you name it first. You can put some explanation about it if you want to. I personally don't, but you can just say what this test is for. That's just for your benefit, really, and if anyone finding your test. You can then set a deadline for your test. You can set a specific time at the end of a specific day. Obviously, I set mine for the Sunday at midnight before the Monday morning, and that's very, very easy to do. I never set a time normally, actually. I just at the end of a specific day. So we can set it for Monday at midnight. You don't have to use an assessment, but I tend to use the quizzes as a way of the students assessing their progress. So we used a pass, not pass assessment, but you can use a variety of assessments. And then it asks you to decide what percentage would be a pass. I always use 10 questions, and I encourage other staff to do that, and therefore they have to get 8 right to pass. So passed or not. You can add this to the assessment record so that you can actually build an assessment record online. It's up to you. So that's your quiz set up in the sense it's now got a name, but you haven't actually added your questions yet. So at that point, I tend to save it so that my quiz is saved. And then what I need to do is add questions to my quiz. So you can go back to your quiz there. So there's my quiz, but at the minute it doesn't have any questions. So if you go on questions, there'll be nothing there. So there's nothing you can do there. So you go back to your quiz. And you want to edit. Oh no, I've gone to the wrong place now. Look at that. Let's just go back and save that. Okay, so now I want to add questions. So here's the button here. So I can add all sorts of questions. I can have an either-or question, a multiple choice question, a multiple response question, short answers. I don't tend to use open answers because you have to mark them yourself, and the whole point of these quizzes is I don't have to mark them. Select from a list question, fill in the blank, which actually they find very hard. I'll show you those in a minute. Matching, order, and hotspot. So you just click on the question type, and you can have a mix of question types, and it really is straightforward. You type in the question here. This is a multiple choice one. You select which answer is the correct one. It doesn't matter which one it is. You type in the question, correct, not correct, and then you can add a further alternative if you want to make it more difficult. So it's up to you how many alternatives you have. You then save that question at the bottom, and you can build these quizzes really slowly. I built one a week. The first year I ran this, I did one quiz a week. Oops, I forgot to name that one. And then the following year, I just improved them. So now I've got a bank of quizzes that I can use every year, and I can improve them. So now you can see that my quiz now has one question on it at the moment. So I'll show you a quiz that's already been done so you can have a look at it. So what is sociology? It's their very first quiz. And you can see there's a number of different questions. So that one's a multiple choice. That's another multiple choice. This is one where it's not fill in the blanks, it's the drop-down list menu. So there's two sorts of questions you can do. You can do fill in the blanks or select from a list. What I find is just having the blanks on their own, when students are at home, they find it really, really difficult because the word they're thinking of might actually be correct, but it's not the word that you've typed in. And so they tend to get very upset because it says they've got a wrong answer when in fact they haven't. So they may have put pupil and I've actually written student as the correct answer. So I avoid using those and instead we use the drop down. So where you want to fill in the blank, I tend to use select from a list. So that at least they've got a chance of actually getting it right, because it's frustrating for them when they know they've got a question right, but it's not the choice that I've chosen. Again, another multiple choice one. That's an either-or question, an either-or question. And this one is where they have to drag the correct answer in. I'll try and get it right. and so on. So that's how easy they are to set up. I'll just show you permissions and options. Okay, I didn't do very well on that test because I didn't answer many of the questions. So as you can see there, at the end of the test, it tells me how well I've done. I only got one question right. I'm a terrible sociology teacher. And then you can view in more detail as a student what you chose and what the correct answer was. So it actually shows them where they've gone wrong as well, which is absolutely excellent for them. So they're actually really learning from that. It's almost like peer assessment taking place. In terms of permissions, you can edit, first of all, test settings. So I talked about the fact that you could give them more than one attempt. If you go into options, the scoring method, so they can actually receive a penalty for an incorrect or incomplete answer. I wouldn't do that to my students, but you can do that. You can set a percentage required for obtaining completed. So if you want to actually add the test to the progress report, then you can actually set a percentage they have to achieve. You can display the questions in a random order, so that if they're trying to help each other, they can't say give someone the answers. You can allow them free navigation, so they can skip tests, go back, start again, or keep them going forward only. You can give them more than one attempt. So again, for weaker students, they can have, say, 3 attempts at the test. You can also, if you want to, set a time limit, so they have to do it within a certain amount of time, or keep it unlimited. You can decide where and when you show them the feedback, so they can see whether they've got it right after each question and each attempt. You can never show them it, or you can only show them the right answers after the deadline. I personally make it easy for them. I only give them one attempt, but I give them unlimited time. I don't penalise them for getting things wrong, and I let them see the feedback as soon as they've completed it, because I think that works better. They tend to come in the class really excited if they've done well as well. So one of the things I think the quizzes are really good at is showing progress over time, and I want to demonstrate that with a particular student. This is one of the things that we have to evidence in school now. I'm sure all of you have had this happen a lot to you this year. So if we take Damon Lee, for example, here, one of my students, this is the first quiz that he ever did, and he got 6.33 out of 10. So for a first attempt, not bad. He's a student around about aiming for a C to a B grade. All these questions, all these quizzes at the beginning, these first 3 quizzes, are all building their knowledge of sociology, and then they had a recap at the end. On quiz 2, Damon scored slightly better. So on the first quiz, he got 6.33. On the second quiz, he got 8.17, which is brilliant. That means the terminology is now beginning to stick. On quiz 3, we're looking for Damon Lee again. This time he got 9.17, so really he's showing progress over time. So this is over 3 weeks he's showing progress. And the important quiz is quiz 4, the recap. So this is testing all his knowledge so far. So those 3 quizzes are being tested again, but in a slightly different way. And though he had it in late, he did actually pass and he got full marks. Now obviously that doesn't always work that way. I'll show you another student where it hasn't worked that way, because progress isn't always going in one direction. If it was doing so, then, you know, all our students would be absolutely wonderful. So for a weaker student, I've got a student here called Katie. So her first quiz, she scored 7, which is good, a good start. Looking for Katie again. On the second quiz, she scored 8, so she appears to be making progress, which is brilliant. And she's one of my weaker students. I think her FFTD is around about a D. Again, she improved on quiz number 3. So on her individual quizzes, she's doing very well. She's showing progress. However, when we look at her recap quiz, she only got 7. So she made progress across the 3 quizzes, but when it came to testing all of her knowledge altogether, she didn't show progress. Now, obviously, that's what happens with students. You know, they're not going to be like robots and do well. But what it allowed me to do and see very clearly was that Katie was able to progress on individual topics, which suggested she was grasping terminology, but the fact that she didn't score very well on the recap quiz suggests that she's struggling with revision. So the quizzes allowed me to have a learning conversation with Katie, and it was revision that was the issue. She didn't really know how to revise. So we went through some revision techniques, such as mind mapping and using card sorts, to improve her skills in that area. So not only am I able to demonstrate progress over time, I can use the data to actually find out what's going wrong for a particular student. The other thing you can do in terms of differentiation is you can see how the whole class are doing, first of all. So on a Monday, I have a look at the reports. You get reports on the quizzes here. And I can look at test statistics, and I can see how many of the class achieved how many points. So on that first quiz, 60 to 80% of our class got between 60 and 100%. We had 9 students below 60%. Now, if I want to look in more detail at that, if that's not good enough for me, because I want to find out which questions I didn't do so well in, then I can look at question statistics. And then I can actually see per question where the issues are. So question 1 was fine. Question 2 was generally good, but there were 10 people who got that wrong, so that might be a starter activity. And so on. So you can see. So certainly what you can do is, and certainly what we've done in school is, where students have done well on a question, we will ask them to lead the starter on that particular area. Where students have done poorly on a test overall, as a class teacher, I may well recap that work again and use the starter activity to go over the work. I can also look at individual student scores. So if I've got pupil premium students or SEN students, I can literally look into their actual reports themselves and look individually at each question and see if there's particular questions that that student is struggling with. So it means I can then personalise the learning for that student. The other thing that's happened with our online quizzes is they're a great way of monitoring whole school targets. So our PSHE programme is delivered by tutors, and it's very hard for the staff who run it to actually see what's going on in terms of going in the class. So what they've done is they've set up VLE quizzes, whole school quizzes, and they're set up per tutor group. So each tutor group has its own course page, and they carry out the quiz, and then the PSHE team can actually see the work is being delivered, it's being understood, and the students are actually showing progress. So the quizzes are absolutely excellent at whole school level or individual level. Is that enough on the quizzes now? I was going to quickly go on to the assignments.
Yep, sounds good.
Okay, so this is all great, the quizzes, if you want to do just brief assessment of learning, but clearly sociology is not assessed in this way. So how do I teach my student exam skills? We do this through assignments, and I'm just going to show you one assignment we've set up. So an assignment, I can set what I want. So in this assignment, the students have to write a long response, so a piece of writing, and it's a 12-mark response. How far would sociologists agree that the role of education is to prepare young people to accept their place in society, and it's worth 12 marks? What we did in the lessons before this homework was we set up a mind map and an essay plan. So the students actually planned for this essay in lesson time, and this is just a brief reminder of what they did in the lesson. So they're told what to put in paragraph 1, their introduction, what they should include in paragraph 2, paragraph 3, and so on. So we spent some time in class going over the structure of how to answer this question. They would then set it for homework. Okay, and then what you can see here is the student hand in. This student who started late didn't do this piece of work. She is the only one that didn't do it. There are reasons for that which I can't go into. But as you can see, apart from another student who went off sick, Rachel, every single student has completed this piece of work. Now, what I want to show you is formative assessment or progress over time. So what I did was I told them that they were going to hand it in the first time, and the first time they handed it in, they wouldn't get a grade. The first time they handed it in, they would only get feedback. So if we look at Sophia Jenkins, who's a high-performing student. So what you can see there is she's got 2 essays. This was the first essay she handed in, and this is her final essay that she handed in. In the box below, you can clearly see that this is my first comment on her work. So I've put, you've made some good points, but they lack terminology and you don't provide examples. Use the corrected file to make improvements. And then there's a key to corrections. And then you can see above there, this is my comment on her second piece of work. So what the VLE allows you to do is, it allows you to open up the file, this file here, and correct it. So what you're seeing now is her essay corrected by me. Just try and make it smaller. So she knows that the red writing means she has to do something. The blue writing she can just nick from me, she can just copy it. The stuff I've crossed out she's to remove, and I also underline all the key terms so she can see how many key terms she's using. So what I do is I correct the initial file, and then I attach it to the assignment, and she sees it down here at the bottom. So she gets a corrected file attached to her assignment. I then send her assignment back to her, and I ask her to resubmit it. And I've put here on the second marking, your work will be given a grade. So then she resubmits it at an agreed date, incorporating all my changes. This is what she's done here. And what this allows me to do very, very clearly is I can clearly see that she's incorporated all my feedback, because what often happens when we mark is we give the work back to the student and then we never see it again, and then we can't remember what it is we wanted them to do. So what I can do is get up both pieces of work on the screen and compare them and check she's actually instigated my feedback. So it's a really good example of feed forward. Weaker students, again, it works just as well. So if we go back to Katie, who's one of my weaker students, what this allows me to do is make sure the student is achieving their target grade. So Katie was aiming for a D, that was her target grade. Exactly the same process, she gets a first marking and a second marking. This was her first marking, so you can see her level of ability is much lower than Sophia's, but because it's personalised to her, I can make sure that my feedback is personalised to her and get her to the correct level. So I had to give her quite a lot more help in order for her to achieve. So I sent that back to her. And that should appear as her resubmission. Doesn't like it. I'm just going to try and open that again. So I found this absolutely vital when we're having work sampling at school, because all I need to do is print off these assignments, and I can demonstrate very easily to our quality assurance team that the students are actually making progress, because I can show them their original piece of work, the corrected file, and the final piece of work. The students have got into a good habit with homework handling through the quizzes, so they're very much used to this approach. Issues about compatibility, I don't know why that's not opening. It just doesn't want to open. There it is, and there's her redone essay, which isn't at the same level as Sophia's, but for her is a very good essay, and obviously we can move her on. Very, very finally, because I think I've gone on too long, peer marking. So I can set individual assignments for individual students, which is great, but sometimes I want to set group assignments because I want students to peer mark them in class. And so what you can do very easily on the VLE is you can set up some assignments to be handed in by the group. So there's a group response one there. So this is where I set the assignments up per learning group. You have to put your learning groups into the VLE first, but it's very easy to do. And then you can see when one person hands in that work, it's handed in for the whole group. What that means is you can print off the work and put it around the class, and it's completely anonymous. It's not owned by one person. It's a group response, and it makes it much easier for the students to mark it and be honest about how good the work is. And actually it turns into quite a competition in the end. I think that's it, unless there are any questions.
No, that's absolutely fabulous. Again, thank you, Juliet. Really do appreciate that.